Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 3 of the Midweek Word. Glad to have you back. Check out the series. Please do me a favor if you're watching this on YouTube. Make sure that you like the videos, comment on the videos, subscribe. It helps spread the word and what we're doing here. I do appreciate everybody who has come and watched the videos at this point. I hope that it is something that you're able to get and that you're enjoying it. It's an extra time in the word and things like that. But it definitely helps when you like the videos and then you subscribe to the channel. It also lets me know that more people are checking it out and everything, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. I want to make sure that's happening, so we're continuing to spread this thing. Leave comments about maybe something you would like to hear from, or maybe a passage that speaks to you, and maybe we can bring it up on a future episode or something like that. Now, one thing I do want to point out here, as this kind of ties in with what we're going to be talking about today, and starting today in our first part of our little mini series that we're going to have here, the Midweek Word. That's talking about our callings. So just to kind of explain what I mean here, I don't do these videos for the likes or the subscribes or anything like that. Yeah, everybody wants to be YouTube famous or Instagram famous, Facebook famous. You want all those likes and hearts and everything else. That's not really why I do this. I do this mainly for a few reasons. The reasons why I started the Midweek Word is because I felt I needed to take a step out of my comfort zone and do something a little more bold. I was recently doing a study with men at my church, and one of the things suggested that, when we're talking about our callings for God and what God is calling us to do, we need to be bold and take action and go and do those things, even when we sometimes are kind of nervous to do it. I don't have the best camera. I'm working off of a Mac camera right now. I don't have any fancy equipment or any of that, but this is what I enjoy doing, and it's fun. I get a lot out of this. The other reasons I did this was for my small group of guys that I teach in my youth. Sixth grade, they're now going on seventh grade boys. This gives them an extra opportunity to be in the Word each week, besides when we do our weekly meetings. And then it's also to get me back into the Word. I struggled for a long time being out of the Bible and not reading it enough, really to understand, where, my religion and the things I believe. I need to get more into the Word again, and this is helping me do that again. Um, but one of the biggest reasons I started this was because back when I was an early Christian in my teenage years, I had felt a very strong calling into ministry. I had felt a very strong calling into actually preaching. Um, at my old church, there were a couple Wednesday nights and things like that where I got to speak to our congregation. I got to help with our youth. Even as being a youth, I got to help with our youth group with my youth pastor at the time, who's now who's a close friend of mine, a dear friend of mine. Um, but one of the things that happened after I'd gotten this calling and I'd had all these opportunities, even right before I got married, I actually preached two messages on Wednesday nights at my old church. And after I got married, though, I got so wrapped up in I've got to make sure I'm keeping my married life together. As a newlywed couple, things are crazy. So I was focused on that. I had basically adopted a daughter through marriage. So I was all of a sudden thrust in from being this single guy who is dating to now I'm married, and now I'm in fatherhood too. So I had some things I had to adjust, and unfortunately, I really lost sight of where I was going in my religious path, in my path with God. Um, and it took several years to really get me back on track with that. I started attending a new church, and it really kind of opened my eyes. That's how I got involved with doing youth again. And I felt like this was something that was going to help me get back into the area where I wanted to be and try to get back on that path of possibly getting into ministry again and preaching. Sorry about that. My phone is on loud and ESPN is calling. Let me turn that off real quick. But so that was some of the main reasons I started the Midweek Word. And I felt like that was my calling. So what we're going to talk about over the next 3 episodes, starting this week, is we're going to talk about being called by God to do something. And I can't tell you that God's going to tell you that you're going to you need to go for this job, or this is the profession you need to be in, and stuff like that. I'm specifically kind of referring to here is how can you use a calling that maybe God gave you, or a gift that God gave you, to spread the word of God. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to be in the book of Exodus, so we're going way back in the Old Testament. I've been kind of in the New Testament the last couple episodes. Now we're in the Old. It's Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 through 12. And I'm reading out of the New International Version, in case you wondered. But let me go ahead and read this off to you. So it says, "Then the Lord said," now this is also, by the way, this is God talking to Moses. If you don't know the story of Exodus, read it. Most people, you've probably seen movies like the Ten Commandments and stuff like that. But, read it. This is a great thing where Moses leads the people of Israel, or the Jewish people, out of Egypt. A man who never would have even been thought of taking this huge undertaking. And that's kind of what this verse is talking about here. So it says, "Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people in Egypt, and have heard them crying out because of their oppressors. I know about their sufferings, and I have come down to rescue them from the power of Egypt, of the Egyptians, and to bring them from that land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the territory of the Canaanites," and I'm going to probably butcher some of these names. I apologize. I'm not great with some of the older names. Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. So because the Israelites' cry for help has come to me, and I have also seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them, therefore go. I am sending you," he's talking to Moses, "to Pharaoh, so that you may lead my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." And this is where it gets really good right here. This is the part I want to focus on today. "But Moses asked God, 'Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt?' And he answered, 'I will certainly be with you, and this will be the sign to you that I am the one who sent you. When you bring the people out of Egypt, you will all worship God at this mountain.'" So, again, we're talking about when God officially calls Moses to be the man who's going to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Okay? We talk about callings, and we're thinking, should we sing in the worship team? Should we, be called to a prayer team, or lead a small group, or preach, or things like that? God is calling Moses to lead thousands of people out of a land that has kept them as slaves for years. Okay? And this is not something, it's not like the Pharaoh, obviously if you know the story, Pharaoh doesn't just give in lightly. He actually laughs in basically Moses' face at first, and Moses performs these different signs and stuff by the power of God, to prove prove that, hey, I'm doing this because God's telling me to do it. Let these people go. Pharaoh keeps disagreeing, and things happen. About the plagues and all that. So the book of Exodus is Moses leading God's people out of Egypt. It's a huge calling to stand up to a king. All right, we're talking about the Pharaoh. We're talking about a man who is literally in control of one of the largest empires in the world at that point. If you know your history, the Egyptian Empire, massive, controlled huge parts of Africa, all the way up into modern day Middle East and stuff like that. So this was a huge empire controlled by one man, and Moses' job was, him being a nobody, to go before that one man and say, let God's people go. Let me take them to where we're supposed to be. And Moses asked a very simple but also a very complicated question to God. He says, "Who am I? What right do I have to do this?" And that's a question I think we all ask ourselves whenever we get that notion that we're called to do something, like to preach or to sing or to lead and things like that. We ask, who are we? We know for a fact that we have done things wrong, that we are sinners, that we're not perfect, and we see these people who are up on the in the pulpit, or in front of the microphone and stuff like that, and they're people who, on a lot of times, from our backed up point of view, we see them as almost perfect. But that's not the case. If you read the Bible, if you read out throughout different parts of the Bible, God always uses people who are flawed and who are really not even worthy to step up and become great. And like I said, we see this all throughout the Bible. We see it with Moses here. Moses, not really much of anybody, but he and his brother are called to lead these people. You go further on in the Bible, you talk about David, who was a shepherd, small, scrawny, not really thought to be a warrior or anything like that, takes down a giant, okay, eventually becomes king. You think about the disciples under Jesus. Those were just regular guys, blue-collar guys. We're going to talk more about them and more about this kind of stuff in our next part 2, which will be about being worthy of the calling. But we got to understand that just when God calls us to do something, it's not just us anymore. Okay, if we fully embrace it and we fully put our trust in God, it's not just us trying to get to that calling anymore. The midweek word here is not just me getting to the midweek word. It's me putting in the study time into my Bible, looking at these verses and things like that, and taking time to pray about it and getting the words that are right to speak from God. Doesn't mean I pronounce them right, as you could tell in some of that, but this is something that we're not alone in anymore. When we are called to do something, if you have prayed and God has laid something on your heart, like if he has said, hey, you should sing, be on the worship team, don't just take that lightly. You're not going to be alone when you go to try out for the worship team or anything like that, or as you try to improve your musical skills or your vocals, or, if you play an instrument. God is with you in those moments. Just like he says here to Moses. Moses is like, who am I? I'm about to go before the king of Egypt. And I'm going to tell this man, I'm going to take his slaves away. He's going to kill me. He's going to do terrible things to me probably. And God says, no, don't worry. I'm with you. And that's the point, guys. When we get these callings, when we are told by God to do something, whether it be to preach, to sing, to lead, to travel, for missionaries and things like that, any of those things, we're not doing it alone anymore. If we have really focused on giving our hearts to God and letting Jesus in here, all of that will just, he will give you what you need to speak the right words, to sing properly. I'm not saying that you can be a horrible singer and, just magically all of a sudden you're good. That's not the way it works. It does take practice. It does take motivation, skills. Being something called in ministry, when I always talked about me being a preacher, when I just preached my messages, I didn't just all of a sudden, just come up with something and be like, oh, here we go. Yeah, I got it. Praise God. I dove into the word. I spent weeks sometimes in prayer and in different parts of the Bible researching and tying things together that helps people understand it. So, make sure you understand God is with us. Moses asked, who am I? God says, don't worry about who you are. All you need to know is I'm with you. And that's the thing we got to understand with our callings. So, I read a couple of things here and I wanted to, with a couple of little messages here. Obviously, when it comes to our callings, you've got to stay in touch with God. Okay. To continue to get have God be with you and work through you in your calling, you've got to stay in touch with him too. It's about that relationship, prayer, listen to what he tells you. A lot of times you'll get things answered through prayer. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes things seem just completely quiet. If that's the case, that's fine. Keep praying, pray endlessly. Eventually a sign, a word, you'll feel it, you'll get spoken to, things will come up. And understand one of the big things is that you're going to have to sacrifice. Okay, to do the midweek word, to get into the word daily and read and figure out what I'm going to talk about next and things like that, that requires sacrifice of time. As you can tell by my shirt here, I'm a little bit of a nerd. But I like video games. I like comics. I like stuff like that. I'm starting to collect comics. I'm a big video game fanatic, things like that. I have to put those things aside. I sacrifice time with those things. Time where I think I'm enjoying playing video games. I enjoy being in the Word too. So I sacrifice that time. Unfortunately, it's with me proclaiming to be a Christian, sometimes that you have to sacrifice relationships. I haven't had too many of those situations where people have looked down on me for being a Christian, but I know a lot of people who do. So, sometimes you have to deal with that kind of thing. I've sacrificed time with my family for some things to be more in the Word of God, because in the end, that time sacrificed will benefit my family. That's one of the greatest things that I think I've been able to do. Another calling that I've had is to be here more for my family. I feel like I've been able to do that more. I want to leave you just with a little, just a little sentence that kind of sums this up and will kind of lead us into our next part. Our next part is going to be about, like I said, not worthy of the calling that God gives us. So that'll be part 2 of this little mini series we have within the midweek word. But I felt like this one sentence kind of described a whole lot here. And it says, success does not depend on your skills. It depends on your faith. Okay. I could be a great speaker. Some of you guys may think I speak fairly well. Some of you guys probably think, he could probably work on that. But if I don't have the faith to do it, these words are falling on deaf ears. The words that come off my lips and out of my mouth, they mean nothing. Same thing if you feel like you're called to sing or something like that. Like if you feel like you're called to be in worship or something like that. It's not about your vocal cords. It's not about the vocal trainings that you've had and the fact that you can hold out a soprano can hold out a note for 30 seconds or something like that. It's not about that. If you don't have the faith in it, your worship means nothing. All right. Our goal is that our praises and stuff reach God, but if we're not doing it out of faith, and if we don't have that faith, it's just kind of like we're just tossing up in the air, and gravity's going to pull it right back down. It's never going to reach God. So we got to remember that, a couple things here again, just kind of recapping. When we ask who we are, if we're worthy, God says, don't worry about that right now. Know that I'm with you. That's all you need. And then understand that we may have gifts, we may have special sets of skills, but they mean nothing without faith. Guys, thank you so much again for another week of the Midweek Word. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment. I'll be back next Wednesday with part 2 of this series about your calling. It's going to be titled Not Worthy of the Calling. And we'll learn a little bit about some of the disciples and how Jesus commanded them to do some things and about them being, if they were worthy or not. So thank you again. See you guys next week. Have a great day. Peace.